You know, I was having tea with a very successful entrepreneur last month, and he shared something with me that has stayed in my mind ever since. He said, Gopal Das, I learned the hardest lesson of my life 15 years ago, and it cost me my first business. Naturally, I was curious. Here was a man who had built multiple successful companies, who was respected in his industry, who seemed to have figured out the game of life. What lesson could have been so hard that it still haunted him 15 years later? He leaned forward and said, I was young, enthusiastic, building my first startup, and I believed in this philosophy of radical transparency and vulnerability. I had read all these books about authentic leadership, about being open with your team, about showing your human side. So I did exactly that. In a team meeting, I openly shared my fears that we might not make payroll next month, that I was terrified of failing, that I sometimes had no idea what I was doing and was just figuring it out as I went along. I thought I was being authentic, building trust, creating a culture of openness. He paused, took a sip of his tea, and continued. Within 2 weeks, 3 of my best people had resigned. Within a month, word had spread in the industry that my company was unstable. Within 2 months, we lost 2 major clients who had heard rumors about our financial troubles. Within 3 months, I had to shut down the business. And you know what the irony was? We actually would have been fine. The financial crunch was temporary. We had solutions in the pipeline. But my openness, my vulnerability, my sharing of weaknesses, it created a reality worse than the actual problem. I had weaponized my own weaknesses against myself. He looked at me with this mixture of wisdom and regret. That day, I learned something crucial that nobody teaches you in business school, that no self-help book tells you honestly. There's a difference between being authentic and being foolish. There's a difference between vulnerability and oversharing. There's a difference between trusting people and giving them ammunition to use against you. Some weaknesses, some fears, some struggles, they need to stay private. Not because you're being fake, but because you're being wise. Not because you don't trust anyone, but because you understand human nature. As I sat there listening to this man's story, I realized he had articulated something I had observed countless times, but had never quite put into words so clearly. We live in a culture that celebrates vulnerability. We're told to be authentic, to show our true selves, to open up about our struggles. And there's value in this, don't get me wrong, but somewhere along the way, we've confused wisdom with walls. We've mistaken prudence for pretense. We've equated discretion with dishonesty. We've created this idea that if you're not sharing everything with everyone, you're somehow being inauthentic. But here's what I've learned through years of spiritual practice, through counseling thousands of people, through observing human nature in all its complexity. There are some things that should remain private. Not hidden out of shame, not suppressed out of fear, but protected out of wisdom. Your weaknesses, your vulnerabilities, your struggles, these are like seeds. In the right soil, with the right conditions, they can become sources of growth and strength. But in the wrong hands, in toxic environments, with people who don't have your best interests at heart, they become weapons that will be used against you. I watched as this entrepreneur's face showed the pain of that old memory, but also the strength of the wisdom he had gained. He said, after that business failed, I started another one, but this time I was different. I was still authentic, still human, still approachable, but I learned to protect certain information. I learned that leadership sometimes means carrying certain burdens alone or sharing them only with a very select few. I learned that strength isn't about never having weaknesses, it's about knowing who to share them with and who to protect them from. And you know what? That business succeeded, not because I had fewer weaknesses, but because I was wiser about them. This conversation happened in a cafe in Bangalore, but it could have happened anywhere, because this is a universal struggle. Everywhere I go, I meet people who have been burned by sharing too much with the wrong people. The employee who confided in a colleague about struggling with the job, only to have that colleague use it to get ahead. The friend who shared a personal fear with their social circle, only to hear it come back as gossip. The family member who opened up about a mistake, only to have it thrown in their face during every argument for years afterward. The student who admitted to a teacher that they were struggling, only to be labeled as weak and treated differently. And on the other side, I meet people who have been saved by their discretion, the leader who kept their doubts private and projected confidence, allowing their team to remain stable during uncertain times. The person who kept their healing process private, allowing themselves to grow without interference or judgment. The professional who kept their transition plans confidential, protecting themselves from sabotage. The individual who learned which relationships were safe for vulnerability and which ones required protective boundaries. This isn't about building walls around yourself. This isn't about living a fake life. This isn't about pretending to be perfect. This is about understanding something crucial, that our culture of oversharing has made us forget. Protection is not the same as pretense. Boundaries are not the same as barriers, and privacy is not the same as dishonesty. You can be authentic and still be selective. You can be vulnerable and still be wise. You can be real and still be strategic about what you reveal and to whom. Now, I can already sense what some of you might be thinking. But Gopal Das, isn't this going against everything we've been taught about openness and authenticity? Aren't you telling us to be closed off and suspicious of everyone? How can we build genuine relationships if we're always guarding ourselves? These are valid questions, and I'm glad you're asking them, because the answer is nuanced, and nuance is exactly what's missing from our current discourse about authenticity and vulnerability. Let me be absolutely clear about what I'm saying and what I'm not saying. I'm not saying never be vulnerable. I'm not saying trust no one. I'm not saying pretend to be perfect. I'm not saying suppress your struggles or act like you have it all together when you don't. What I'm saying is this: be wise about who you open up to. Be discerning about what you share and when. Understand that not everyone deserves access to your inner world, that not everyone has earned the right to know your weaknesses, that not everyone will handle your vulnerability with care. There's a beautiful concept in our spiritual tradition called viveka, a discrimination, discernment, the ability to distinguish between what is beneficial and what is harmful, between what is appropriate and what is not, between wisdom and foolishness. Viveka doesn't mean being closed off. It means being conscious. It means understanding that trust is not given automatically. It's earned over time through consistent behavior. It means recognizing that some people have your best interests at heart, while others are simply collecting information to use for their own benefit. Think about it like this. If you had a valuable diamond, would you leave it lying around for anyone to take? No, you'd keep it secure, show it only to trusted people, protect it from those who might steal it. Your weaknesses, your vulnerabilities, your struggles, these are valuable too, not because they make you less, but because they're part of your story, your growth, your humanity, and they deserve the same protection you'd give to anything precious. I remember a time in my own life when I learned this lesson the hard way. It was years ago, before I took sannyas, when I was working in the corporate world. I had a colleague who seemed friendly, supportive, someone I thought I could trust. We'd have lunch together, chat about life, and gradually I started opening up to him. I shared my frustrations with certain aspects of the job. I confided that I was considering a different career path eventually. I mentioned some personal struggles I was going through. I thought I was building a friendship, creating a bond through mutual vulnerability. Then came the time for promotions. We were both being considered for the same position, and suddenly things I had shared in confidence started appearing in different forms. In meetings, he would subtly reference my doubts about the job, framing them as lack of commitment. He mentioned to our boss that I was exploring other options, making me seem disloyal. He positioned himself as stable and committed while painting me as uncertain and unstable. He had taken my vulnerabilities, my honest sharing, and weaponized them. And it worked. He got the promotion. I was devastated, not just because I didn't get the promotion, but because I felt betrayed. I had trusted this person. I had been authentic and vulnerable, doing what all the self-help books told me to do. And it had backfired spectacularly. But as I reflected on this experience over time, I realized something important. This wasn't a lesson in becoming closed off or distrusting everyone. This was a lesson in discernment. This was a lesson in understanding that vulnerability is a gift you give to people who have proven themselves worthy of it, not something you scatter freely to everyone. The mistake wasn't that I shared my struggles and doubts. The mistake was that I shared them with someone who hadn't earned that level of trust, in an environment where competition was high and stakes were significant. I had been naive about human nature. I had believed that everyone operates from the same values I did. I had assumed that my authenticity would be met with the same authenticity, and that assumption cost me. But here's what's interesting: that painful experience taught me something invaluable that has served me well ever since. It taught me to observe people carefully before opening up to them. It taught me that real friends, real trustworthy people, prove themselves through consistent behavior over time, not through a few pleasant conversations. It taught me that some information should be shared only with people who have demonstrated loyalty, integrity, and genuine care for your well-being. It taught me that wisdom sometimes looks like restraint. And as I moved into spiritual life, as I started counseling people, I saw this pattern everywhere: the devastating consequences of oversharing with the wrong people, and the protective power of appropriate boundaries and discretion. So let's talk about the problem more deeply. Why is this such a widespread issue? Why are so many people getting hurt by sharing their weaknesses indiscriminately? What's driving this cultural push toward radical transparency that's actually harming people? The first problem is that we've been sold a distorted version of authenticity. We've been told that being authentic means sharing everything, that hiding anything means you're being fake. But this is a false binary. You can be your authentic self without broadcasting every weakness, fear, and struggle to everyone around you. Authenticity is about being true to yourself, not about being an open book to everyone else. You can be genuinely you while still maintaining appropriate boundaries about what you share and with whom. I see this especially with younger people who have grown up in the age of social media. They've been conditioned to share everything: their meals, their moods, their moments, their struggles. The line between private and public has been so blurred that many don't even realize there should be a line. And they're paying the price. I've counseled young professionals who posted about their work struggles on social media only to be passed over for promotions. I've talked to students who shared their weaknesses publicly only to be targeted by bullies. I've met people who laid bare their personal struggles online only to have trolls and strangers judge them mercilessly. The second problem is our misunderstanding of vulnerability. Vulnerability has become this buzzword, this virtue that everyone's supposed to practice. And yes, vulnerability in the right context, with the right people, is powerful and healing. But vulnerability without discernment is just recklessness. Breen Brown, who has done extensive research on vulnerability, has said clearly that vulnerability is not about oversharing. It's not about being vulnerable with everyone. It's about being vulnerable with people who have earned the right to hear your story. But somehow this nuance gets lost. People hear vulnerability is strength and interpret it as share your weaknesses with everyone. They confuse vulnerability with verbal diarrhea. They think that opening up to anyone and everyone makes them brave, when actually it often just makes them a target. True vulnerability requires wisdom, knowing who to open up to, knowing when it's appropriate, knowing how much to share. The third problem is that we underestimate human nature. We want to believe that everyone is good, that people will handle our vulnerability with care, that showing our weaknesses will bring out the best in others. And while this is sometimes true, it's not always true. Some people are genuinely supportive and trustworthy, but others are competitive, insecure, manipulative, or simply opportunistic. They're looking for advantage, for leverage, for ways to get ahead. And your weaknesses, freely shared, become their weapons. This isn't cynicism, this is realism. Understanding that not everyone has pure intentions doesn't mean you mistrust everyone. It means you're wise enough to protect yourself while still being open to genuine connections with worthy people. It means you don't assume trust, you let people earn it through their consistent actions over time. The fourth problem is that we've confused support, seeking with oversharing. When you're struggling, you absolutely should seek support. That's healthy, that's wise, that's human, but support, seeking, should be strategic. You share your struggles with a therapist, a counselor, a trusted mentor, a close friend who has proven themselves reliable, a family member who has your back. You don't share them with casual acquaintances, competitive colleagues, gossipy relatives, or strangers on the internet. The difference is huge. When you strategically seek support from trustworthy people, you get genuine help. When you overshare with everyone, you often get judgment, gossip, and exploitation. Yet many people don't make this distinction. They feel the need for support and just start sharing with whoever will listen, not considering whether these people are actually safe or helpful. The fifth problem is the permanence of shared information. Once you've shared something, you can't take it back. Once someone knows your weakness, they know it forever, and you have no control over what they do with that information. They might keep it confidential today, but use it against you tomorrow when circumstances change. They might share it with others, who share it with others, and suddenly something you said in confidence is common knowledge. I've seen this destroy relationships, careers, reputations. Someone shares a weakness in a moment of trust. Years later, the relationship sours, or there's a conflict, or the person wants leverage in a negotiation. And suddenly, that old vulnerability comes back as a weapon. Remember when you told me you struggled with this? Remember when you admitted that? What was once shared in trust becomes ammunition in conflict. The sixth problem is that we've forgotten the power of mystery and strength. There's something powerful about not showing all your cards, about maintaining some mystery, about projecting strength even when you don't feel strong. This isn't about being fake. This is about understanding that perception matters, that how others see you affects how they treat you, and that sometimes keeping your struggles private allows you to work through them more effectively. Leaders throughout history have understood this. They carry their doubts privately while projecting confidence publicly, not because they're being dishonest, but because their teams need that stability. Parents often shield their children from adult worries, not because they are pretending problems don't exist, but because children need to feel secure. This isn't deception. This is wisdom about what to share and what to protect. So these are the problems: distorted authenticity, misunderstood vulnerability, underestimating human nature, confusing support, seeking with oversharing, not considering the permanence of shared information, and forgetting the power of appropriate boundaries. And these problems are creating real damage in people's lives. So what's the solution? The first solution is developing discernment in relationships. Not everyone deserves the same level of access to you. Think of relationships as concentric circles. In the outermost circle are acquaintances, people you know casually. They get polite conversation, surface-level sharing, nothing deep. Moving inward, you have friendly colleagues, casual friends, people you enjoy spending time with but who haven't proven deep trustworthiness. They might get a bit more, but still nothing truly vulnerable. Then you have close friends, people who have demonstrated over time through consistent action that they're trustworthy, loyal, and genuinely care about your well-being. They get more access, more vulnerability, more truth. And at the very center, you have your inner circle, perhaps just 2 or 3 people, maybe a spouse, a best friend, a mentor. These are people who have earned complete trust through years of proven loyalty. Only they get full access to your struggles, fears, and weaknesses. This isn't about being closed off. It's about being wise. Let people earn their way toward the center through demonstrated trustworthiness over time. Don't give circle access based on a few good conversations or because someone seems nice. Watch how people handle small confidences before you share big ones. Watch how they treat others. Watch whether they gossip, whether they're competitive, whether they have your back when it costs them something. The second solution is practicing the art of strategic sharing. Even with trusted people, there's a skill to sharing weaknesses in a way that doesn't disempower you. You can acknowledge struggles without dwelling on them. You can ask for specific help without general complaining. You can share vulnerabilities while also sharing what you're doing about them, maintaining a sense of agency and direction. For example, instead of saying, "I'm terrible at public speaking and I'm terrified of my upcoming presentation," you might say to a trusted mentor, "I'm working on improving my public speaking skills. I have a presentation coming up and I'd love your advice on preparation." See the difference? You've acknowledged the challenge without declaring yourself helpless. You've opened a door for support without positioning yourself as weak. The third solution is creating safe spaces for processing. You need places where you can be completely vulnerable, where you can express your struggles without fear of judgment or exploitation. But these spaces should be carefully chosen and protected. A therapist's office is one such space, professionally confidential and designed for complete openness. A journal is another, completely private, where you can process anything without filter. A prayer or meditation practice is another, a sacred space between you and the divine. Having these safe spaces means you don't have to suppress your struggles. You can fully acknowledge and process them, but you're doing so in contexts designed for that purpose, rather than casually spilling your weaknesses to people who haven't earned that trust. The fourth solution is developing inner strength through spiritual practice. The stronger you are internally, the less you need external validation or support for every struggle. This doesn't mean going through life alone. It means developing the capacity to carry certain things yourself, to work through difficulties internally before needing to process them externally, to find strength in your spiritual practice rather than constantly seeking it from others. In the Bhagavad Gita, there's this concept of being sthiti prajna, steady in wisdom, undisturbed by circumstances, centered in the self. This doesn't mean being unfeeling or isolated. It means having such a strong internal foundation that you're not constantly blown about by external circumstances or dependent on others' support for every challenge. You can face difficulties with an inner stability that doesn't require broadcasting every struggle. The fifth solution is learning to project appropriate strength even during weakness. This is not about pretending problems don't exist. It's about understanding that how you present challenges affects how others respond to them and how they perceive you. If you're a leader facing difficulties, you can acknowledge challenges while focusing on solutions and projecting confidence in the path forward. If you're going through personal struggles, you can be honest about having difficulties without going into detail that makes others uncomfortable or gives them ammunition. This is particularly important in professional contexts. Your boss doesn't need to know every insecurity you have. Your colleagues don't need to know every personal struggle. You can be professional, pleasant, and appropriate without being an open book. And this protects you while maintaining genuine relationships. The sixth solution is understanding the difference between privacy and secrecy. Privacy is healthy. It's having boundaries about what's shared and what's kept personal. Secrecy is unhealthy. It's hiding things out of shame or fear, particularly things that are actually harming you or others. You can be private about your struggles without being secretive. Privacy says, "This is mine to process in my own way with my chosen support." Secrecy says, "I'm hiding this because it's shameful, and if anyone knew, I'd be exposed." For example, working through a difficult time with appropriate professional help and keeping it private is healthy. Hiding an addiction or abuse situation is unhealthy secrecy. The difference is in the motivation and the impact. Privacy protects and empowers. Secrecy isolates and harms. The seventh solution is vetting people before trusting them with vulnerability. How do you know who's trustworthy? Watch their behavior over time. Do they keep confidences or do they gossip? Do they support others or do they compete? Do they celebrate others' successes or are they envious? Do they show up during difficult times or only during good times? Do their actions match their words consistently? Do they take responsibility for mistakes or always blame others? Trust is earned gradually. Start with small confidences and see how they're handled. If someone proves trustworthy with small things, you can gradually share more. If they prove untrustworthy, if they gossip about others to you, if they break small confidences, if they're inconsistent, don't move them closer to your center. Appreciate them for who they are, but protect yourself by keeping appropriate boundaries. Now, let me give you specific, practical commitments that will help you navigate this balance between authenticity and wisdom, between connection and protection. First commitment, the 24-hour rule for sharing. Before sharing any weakness, struggle, or vulnerable information, wait 24 hours. Ask yourself, why do I want to share this? What do I hope to gain? Is this person truly trustworthy? Is this the right context? Have they earned this level of access? What's the worst that could happen if this information is misused? After 24 hours of reflection, you'll often realize that sharing isn't necessary, or you'll have clarity on how much to share and with whom. Second commitment, create your trust circle document. Actually write down who is in your inner circle of complete trust. Be ruthlessly honest. This might only be 2 or 3 people, maybe even just 1. That's okay. Better to have 1 truly trustworthy person than 10 questionable ones. Then write down what you're willing to share with the outer circles. This gives you clarity and helps you maintain appropriate boundaries. Third commitment, Would I want this published? Test. Before sharing anything vulnerable, ask yourself, would I be okay if this ended up published somewhere? If this became public knowledge? If this got back to people I'd rather not know? If the answer is a strong no, reconsider sharing it, even with someone you trust. Because once information leaves your mouth, you no longer control it. Fourth commitment, develop your private processing practice. Commit to daily journaling, meditation, prayer, or therapy, whatever works for you. This gives you a safe outlet for processing struggles without the risk of oversharing. Write out your fears, your weaknesses, your struggles. Get them out of your system in a completely safe space. Often, once you've processed things privately, you'll find you don't need to share them with others at all. Fifth commitment, practice the strength from struggle narrative. When you do share challenges, frame them in terms of growth and action. Not, I'm weak at this and it's terrible, but I'm working on improving this area and here's what I'm doing. Not, I'm struggling and don't know what to do, but I'm facing a challenge and exploring solutions. This maintains vulnerability while projecting agency and direction. Sixth commitment, the gradual disclosure approach. Never dump all your vulnerabilities on someone at once, even someone you trust. Share gradually. See how they handle small vulnerabilities before sharing bigger ones. Watch whether they become more trustworthy or less as they learn more about you. Trust deepens gradually with consistent evidence of loyalty and care. Seventh commitment, protect others' vulnerabilities as you want yours protected. This builds your own integrity and also teaches you about the weight of vulnerability. When someone trusts you with their weakness, guard it fiercely. Don't gossip, don't share, don't use it against them. As you practice protecting others' trust, you'll better understand who protects yours. Eighth commitment, regular relationship audits. Every few months, review your relationships honestly. Who has proven trustworthy? Who has disappointed you? Who needs to move further from your center? Who has earned moving closer? Relationships change over time. Stay conscious of who deserves access to your vulnerable self and who doesn't. Ninth commitment, learn to be comfortable with mystery. You don't owe anyone your full story. You don't have to explain every decision, justify every boundary, or share every struggle. Practice being comfortable with people not knowing everything about you. There's power in mystery. There's strength in privacy. You can be warm, friendly, and connected while still maintaining appropriate boundaries. 10th commitment, when burned, learn and adjust. If someone does misuse your vulnerability, and it might happen despite your best efforts, don't close off completely, but do learn. What warning signs did you miss? What made you trust them prematurely? How can you be more discerning going forward? Use painful experiences as teachers, not as excuses to never trust anyone again. Now, I want to address something important because I know some of you might be struggling with this. What if you've already overshared? What if you've already given people ammunition? What if damage is already done? First, give yourself grace. You were doing the best you could with what you knew. Many of us have been taught that radical openness is virtue. You weren't being foolish, you were being trusting. That's not a character flaw. Now you're learning discernment, which is wisdom. Second, you can't take back what's been shared, but you can change what you share going forward. Starting now, be more discerning. Let your future behavior create a new pattern. People will adjust to the new boundaries you set. Third, if information has been misused, you can address it directly when appropriate. You can say, I shared that with you in confidence and I've learned you shared it with others. That breaks my trust and changes our relationship. You don't have to be aggressive, but you can be clear. This sets a boundary and often makes people think twice about misusing your trust again. Fourth, some relationships may need to end or become more distant when trust is seriously broken. That's okay. Not every relationship is meant to last forever. Protecting yourself is more important than maintaining relationships with people who hurt you. Fifth, focus on building new relationships with better discernment. Your past oversharing doesn't have to define your future. You can start fresh with new people, applying the wisdom you've gained. Let me close with a story that beautifully illustrates this principle. There was a king in ancient times who was known for his wisdom. A young prince from another kingdom came to visit and learn from him. During their first conversation, the prince, eager to seem authentic and humble, shared all his insecurities, his doubts about leadership, his fears about the future. The wise king listened patiently. When the prince finished, the king called for his guard and whispered something. The guard left and returned with a beautiful sword. The king presented it to the prince, saying, "This sword has been in my family for generations. It's incredibly sharp, incredibly valuable. I'm trusting you with it." The prince was honored and confused. Why was he being given such a treasure after just arriving? The king continued, "Now, let me tell you something. This sword has two edges. Used with skill and wisdom, it's a magnificent weapon. Used carelessly, it will cut you as easily as it cuts your enemy. Your vulnerabilities are like this sword. They're part of who you are. They can be sources of strength when handled wisely, but shared carelessly with the wrong people. They become weapons against you." The prince suddenly understood. He had handed his vulnerabilities to someone he barely knew. The king wasn't judging him, but teaching him. "My young friend," the king said gently, "authenticity doesn't mean sharing everything with everyone. Wisdom means knowing what to share, with whom and when. Guard your weaknesses as you would guard a double-edged sword. Choose very carefully who you trust to handle them, because in the wrong hands they will cut you deeply. This is the wisdom I want to leave you with today. Your weaknesses, your vulnerabilities, your struggles, they're yours. They're part of your humanity. They're teachers on your journey, but they're not public property. They're not meant to be broadcast to everyone. They're meant to be shared carefully, with people who have proven they'll handle them with care, in contexts where sharing serves your growth and healing. Never share your weaknesses with people who haven't earned that trust, not because you're being fake or closed off, but because you're being wise, not because you're perfect and have no struggles, but because you understand that protection is not weakness, it's wisdom. Not because you don't trust anyone, but because you trust wisely, discerningly, and appropriately. Be authentic, yes. Be vulnerable, yes. But be those things strategically, wisely, with people who have demonstrated they deserve access to your inner world. Let your relationships deepen gradually. Let trust be earned over time. Let your boundaries protect you while still allowing genuine connection with worthy people. Go forth with this wisdom. Be discerning about what you share and with whom. Build genuine relationships with people who prove themselves trustworthy, but protect yourself from those who would misuse your vulnerability. You can be both authentic and boundaried. You can be both open and wise. You can be both vulnerable and protected. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your openness to this teaching. And thank you for your commitment to being both genuine and wise. May you find the people worthy of your trust. May you develop the discernment to protect yourself while staying open to genuine connection. And may you walk through life with both the courage to be authentic and the wisdom to be appropriately guarded. Remember, your vulnerabilities are precious. Guard them wisely, share them rarely, and treasure the few people who prove themselves worthy of holding them with care. Go in wisdom, go in strength. And go with the confidence that protecting yourself is not weakness, it's one of the highest forms of self-respect and wisdom. Thank you.